Hey friends, my name is Chris, and welcome to another one of our midweek messages. This is week 2 of our series, First Things First. And what the midweek message is, if you haven't joined us before, is we take a deep dive in the message with the pastor who delivered it. We have a conversation around faith that's open and honest, and it's a dialogue, asking questions, talking about the implications of what we heard in the message. And so, if you are looking to spend some more time digging into some questions you might have about the sermon this week, or you just want to spend some more time with it, that's what we do here at the midweek message. So, before we get started, make sure to head over to thevillagenashville.com/podcast to listen to this week's message, or you can head to our YouTube at youtube.com/thevillagenashville, and you can find that there, and watch that message so that you can get the full context of what we're talking about. But today, for a second consecutive appearance after a month-long hiatus, we have with us Pastor Travis.
What's up? Why you gotta say it like that?
Well, I gotta say what? Like what?
I mean, it just feels like you're like talking trash.
Oh no, that wasn't trash. That was supposed to be excitement over
yeah,
having you back after your hiatus, which was intentional and helpful for our church. So,
hey, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. Hello to everybody listening or watching. I'm really glad that you're tuning in. It's really fun. It is fun for me to get to do this. This is the kind of thing I wish that I could do with every person who's part of our church who has questions or thoughts or wants to talk through the message more. So I'm really glad we get to at least have this, where hopefully it can feel like that's what we're doing. So thanks for hosting this, Chris. You're doing a great job.
yeah, absolutely. I am hopeful that my questions resonate with others as well, as I try and sift through things right alongside the rest of our church. So, we often talk about how we're preaching to ourselves when the pastors give sermons, and so it's helpful to just have these dialogues in an extended fashion. So, all right. So this week was week 2 of First Things First. So it's not the first of the First Things First. It's the second of the First Things First.
Of the first things. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
But we took a look at. I had it. I have the message right here. I believe it's Luke 10.
Luke 10, 38
through 42.
If memory serves me correctly.
That is correct. All right. So I'm going to actually read that since it's a short selection this week. We'll read that, and that'll serve as the context that we take a look at today. So this is Luke 10, 38 through 42. It says, "Now, as they were traveling along, he entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. And she had a sister called Mary, who was also seated at the Lord's feet and was listening to his word. But Martha was distracted with all her preparations. And she came up to him and said, 'Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do the serving by myself? Then tell her to help me.' But the Lord answered and said to her, 'Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things, but only one thing is necessary, for Mary has chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her.'" So that's the passage we're looking at. It's commonly known as the passage, Martha and Mary, and the context is that Martha and Mary's brother is Lazarus, who Jesus has already risen from the dead, resurrected Lazarus. And so there is a relationship that happens between these three and Jesus. And Jesus is returning to be in their home. And in the midst of that, Martha is whipping up every dish imaginable. And Mary is sitting at Jesus' feet. And so you started that off with, which I completely agreed with. After listening to this story, could we all agree on something for just a minute? I kind of hate Mary. Does anyone else kind of hate Mary? And the answer for me is yes, because
what's her problem, man?
Yeah, I understand, and we'll dive into this, but I feel like throughout my faith, I've asked the question, am I a Martha or Mary? And I still struggle to identify with Mary. I am constantly more identifying with Martha.
Yeah, I think a lot of people identify with Martha. and struggle with this story because of that. And I feel like that, like I said, Mary is that person. Mary feels like, at least at first glance of this story, she feels like the person you do not want to have assigned to your group project, because she's just chilling. And she's just chilling and sweet talking the teacher so that she gets the same grade as everybody else without the work. I don't know if you had people like that
Oh, I
you
most
were in
certainly
school
did.
with, but
And I was Martha.
yeah,
I was getting that stuff done.
absolutely.
So yeah, you said, and then there's Martha. Martha kind of gets a bad rap in the story sometimes, but why? She's just getting it done, right? She's getting stuff done, and so, um, for me, I think that's very much the temptation we all face: is we have to get the stuff done, and that stuff can vary on importance.
Yeah.
There's I think we just kind of have a bucket and we start pouring everything in, regardless of if it's important or not. Last week we talked about the Twinkies in our lives that float around outside of the big rocks and the sand and the little rocks and the things that are priorities. There's things that are vying for our attention, and I think Martha's working on less Twinkie things and more important things, but getting the order out of whack.
Yeah, it's not that what Martha is doing is wrong or bad, which I feel like Martha is such a good representation of life in the 21st century. That there's always, granted, the last 10 months have been a forced slowdown for a lot of people. In like my family, I think we're kind of a Martha family. So, like, especially pre-COVID, like always doing something, stuff on the calendar just about every night. It was really rare for us to be eating dinner together, always trying to juggle different things, juggle kids' activities, juggle incoming things on the phone, on text, on email, on I mean, just like, plus trying to keep up with what's going on in the world, what's going on in the news, like, just this constant barrage of stuff. None of it's bad. It's not like the pre-COVID Garners were out murdering people, or stealing stuff.
That's very
every
good
night.
To hear.
Yeah, right.
That's not what was on the agenda, in case anyone had.
No, in case anybody was wondering, we do wonder, the future of our kids is still in question, but yeah, I feel like Martha's just such a good representation of real and normal life. It's like there is always something coming at you, and you feel like you've always got to be in motion. And seriously, if you don't do it, who's going to do it? Who's going to get it done? Like, the stuff at the end of the day, the stuff still has to get done. So it's a real, it's a real issue. It's a real temptation.
I feel the same way, and I don't have kids, and I don't have a full schedule, and I still feel like, if someone asked if I feel busy right now, I would say, yeah, I feel busy during this season. Oh, yeah. And so I think that's a pretty universal thing. And I also think it's something that's been praised in our culture, that if you're not feeling busy, what are you doing? And so, yeah.
Well, it's somebody said this, like, this was a principle I was taught in college, by an advisor. I think it was an advisor for our fraternity, if I remember correctly, but, he had these sayings, and one of them was, if it is to be, it's up to me. Which, it's not that there's not some truth to that. There's absolutely some truth to that. Hard work is important. Hard work pays off. But yeah, it's that whole culture, like, if I don't do it, who's going to do it? And if it,
No, I performed a musical in 8th grade that we went around to local elementary schools. And it was called Choices Count, and that is one of the songs. I'm pretty sure that was the song I had a solo on. If it is to be, it is up to me. Only 20 letters, 10 two-letter words. That's the first line of that one. So yeah, no, it's not only a real thing in our culture, but it's ingrained, and it's and I don't think busyness necessarily is the problem, but once again, this whole series is about priorities, and so yes, you should be trying to live a full life, but maybe that full life consists of a lot more things that people on the outside, who aren't maybe following Jesus, wouldn't consider to be work or wouldn't consider to be
Yeah.
something filling your time. That if you're sitting in prayer, maybe someone else might consider that a free period. You have 30, 40 minutes, but
Right.
you've considered it a high priority. It is keeping you busy in a sense, but not in the way maybe the world sees it. So that's
So
a
I
lot
know
of. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, you go ahead. That's a
I
lot
was
of,
just I was just gonna say that's a lot of what we're gonna talk about within this story. So
the thing that came to my mind just now is, and you're lucky. I, you know, I give you some garbage because you're not an iPhone person. But one of the things I think you may get this. I now get my weekly, and it's on Sunday, usually during worship, which is funny that that's when
mhm.
it comes through. But I get my weekly screen time report, which
Mhm.
iPhone users, you get the weekly screen time report, which is a scary picture of how scattered and distracted we really are. I mean, and it's not that, like, some people like, you're using your phone for work and that's the primary usage of your phone. So sure, we can say you get a pass, but that's not the vast majority of us. And so
Yeah.
that screen time report is a scary picture of living in a Martha world.
Yeah,
And
the
that's just,
the
that's
21st
just,
century Martha experience.
yeah. And that's just one piece of it. Right. So
Yeah.
that doesn't count anything that we have to actually get done in person or at home or with our family or with our kids or any of that stuff. That's just like, how often are we on Facebook or on the news or
Yeah.
wherever it might be? Um,
I don't have
I
an
hate getting
iPhone, but
that report.
I do have a Mac, and I did get the screen report this morning during worship. So
Yeah.
I was using my phone to cast the service onto the screen, and then I was taking notes on the laptop, and it was like weekly screen use report. And I used to only see that on Sunday mornings on the iPad I used to stream the service, and I'd be like, "Oh, I've only been on this iPad an hour in the last week," and it was just every service.
Yeah.
So
Well, good on you.
yeah, I know. I have some sort of screen management app on my phone. Um, and I either always end up deleting it because I'm too scared, or trying to disregard it because I'm too scared. And
Yeah.
so it's a necessary thing. It's a necessary evil, but I need to actually put it a priority in some way or form of another. So
Yeah. The problem is, like, I've got some time set up for my phone just to help me remember, but it is way too easy to hit the ignore button.
hmm
Um, on that. So it's like, you're over your limit for today. And I'm like, I don't care. Ignore.
yep.
And then it's like, ignore for 1 minute, ignore for 15 minutes, ignore for the rest of the day. And I'm like,
Like,
ignore
oh,
for
I
the
don't want
rest
to
of the
do this
day.
every 1 minute. Yeah.
I'm a grown man. I can make my own decisions. Phone, stop
Yeah.
trying to tell me, like, but then the reality is I'm arguing with myself.
The next
Uh,
step is that they just link it to your bank account, and every time you ignore, it's like $1 out or
that's
$15
right. Okay.
out.
Right. $1 a minute. You
It's
choose.
like, okay, well. So if anyone would like to work on that, we can set up a giving fund where it goes directly to the village. If you
Yeah.
ignore your
Right.
screen time reports,
Yes.
and
Oh, that's really good.
no, that can be part of our next campaign. So, yeah. Anyway, so you kind of gave your TGV version, your Travis Garner version of what your brain thinks through when you're reading this scripture. And once again, it's only 4 or 5 verses, but you're imagining this whole scene in which Martha is in the kitchen and she's thinking about every single dish, as well as slaughtering the goat, as well as like the linens that need to be cleaned for the dinner and all of these things. And then suddenly she remembers, she stops and pauses and says like, "Hey, wait a second, where's Mary?" And so where Mary is, it says, "There's Mary sitting at the Lord's feet listening to what he said." Um, Jesus and the disciples came into the house, and Mary just took a seat. And for some reason, for me, this is the first time I've understood the point of the story for the most part, but this is the first time that I saw it as sitting at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said, and the importance of that versus just sitting down. Um, Both in terms of posture at the Lord's feet and then listening to what he
Yeah.
said. That it's an active sitting,
It is. Oh, that's a really good way to say it.
rather than just not pulling your weight, which is, once again, I
Yeah.
identify with Martha, so I would understand. And I also like to try and think of it into like our context today, if you're having a dinner party and say you're smoking meats on your back grill, on your back porch,
Mm,
and you're frustrated because people are starting to arrive, and maybe you're a little bit behind, and you're like, well, this chicken needs more time. I'm not going to serve raw chicken. And suddenly you're like, well, where's Amanda, and why is she not helping me? And it's because Amanda's serving a different purpose, and in this case, it's likely entertaining all of your guests.
yep.
More than the food, they likely came to see and be in community with you and Amanda and the boys. And so I also like to think of it as that, as in a part of hospitality is not just is actually being in community with your guests. It's not just the food.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I like how you said it's an active sitting. I, yeah, Mary, the reality is Mary's not just chilling, you
mm-hmm.
know? Yeah, she is actively engaged. Yeah, that's a good, I like how you said that. I'll stop there. You keep
An
going.
active sitting, yeah. I mean, you
Yeah.
talked a lot about it. You said in the moment Mary is taking a posture of a disciple, which also has some scandalous connotations on a cultural level because women were not deemed suitable often to have that role of disciple and following a man around and learning from him. Um, and the story then says, but Martha, on the other hand, Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. And another translation says Martha was distracted by her many tasks. And you pointed out that this is the only time in the Bible that the word distracted appears, which
Yeah.
I think is incredibly interesting. One of the things I always remember is that you talk about how do not fear is one of the, if not the greatest or most frequent command throughout Scripture, and that's
Yeah.
always helpful for me because I struggle with how fear helps or not helps, hinders and kind of dictates my life in that way. And so this is one of the instances where I was like, man, God does have foresight and have a plan, and His word is good and His word is true. But I feel like He could have thrown distracted a few more times into the Bible because,
Yeah. Throw us a bone here.
yeah, in today's context, I would have liked to know that that's a little more important. It's
I think
very
God
strange.
didn't want us to be distracted by all the times distracted was in the Bible, and so
That's true.
therefore put it in one time, which would force our focus. What about that?
Yeah, that helps. You said in Greek it's a compound word and it literally means to be pulled apart, which I also think is very helpful. I mean, today in our context, I feel like you're able to just say, "Oh, sorry, I was distracted," and it's just like a common, "Oh, they were daydreaming or they were looking at their phone and texting while you were having a conversation with them." But to be pulled apart sounds a lot more painful, and you even reference
Yeah.
the medieval torture punishment of essentially drawn and quartering someone.
Yeah,
Uh,
I didn't know. I thought that was interesting. I kind of learned as I was studying this week that's the root of the word distracted
mm-hmm.
is that punishment, which um, I don't know, kind of makes a ton of sense in terms of what happens to us mentally.
Yeah, yeah, and
When there's so much going on.
that's what I'm saying is that when I'm
Yeah.
distracted, I'm going to be like I'm pulling myself apart from what I should be focusing on. And I know me and plenty of other people have had conversations about wanting to be more present and what that looks like. And it's still, you can say it, but it's still such a difficult thing to really wrap your head around what it means to
Yeah.
be present.
Well, and I think it's really interesting too, if you think about that, which I'm processing this. I'm thinking this out loud right now, but um, in that form of torture, you're being pulled apart from your core.
Mm-hmm.
So like your limbs are being pulled away from your core, from your heart. And I think that's essentially what happens. It's like we get pulled away from what the core is or what the heart is or what it should be in all these various directions. I just feel that all the time.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I luckily grew up a little before. It wasn't as distracting of a time when I was growing up as it is now. I mean, the access to internet, the screen time. Screen time was not a thing. It was you have to stop playing video games, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't a well-known universal topic in parenting when I was growing up, and yet I still struggle with my attention span, how long I can do something, how often I check my phone, all of those things, and I think we all do. And so, yeah, distracting is hitting differently when you're putting it in that context, especially within this story.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Like, I'm dating myself here, but when I started college, I did not have a computer. We had a computer lab.
Mm-hmm.
And then my first job, my first youth ministry job, right out of college, I had a computer in my office at the church, but I didn't have a laptop. And so there was no way at that point, there was no way to access email remotely. I had to be in the office at that computer. Yeah. And it's just crazy how fast that's changed. And I remember advocating for a laptop. I wanted a laptop because I wanted to be able to work remotely and I asked to please be able to take my work home. And I want to go back and smack 22-year-old, 23-year-old Travis in the head and say, that was the dumbest thing.
Yeah.
It was like the dumbest thing that you could have done.
Real Martha move right there, Trav.
It was. And unfortunately it completely changed my life in a not positive way all the time.
Yeah, because the expectations change with that too. It's like, well, you don't have the excuse of I was away from the office, and unless you have those super, super firm boundaries with your congregates or whoever you're working with of saying like, well, no, this is when I'm able to be on. That doesn't work anymore because we all know we have email on our phones and likely have some form of computer at home and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to pause here and ask because I heard this story again and reread it. I was surprised by something I missed, or not surprised by something I assumed was there that wasn't in this story, and I wonder if it comes at the same time within the actual biblical narrative, and that's John 12, 1 through 11 is a similar story of Jesus visiting Mary and Martha, and it's Jesus anointed at Bethany. And so that is when Mary took a pint of pure nard and poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped it with her hair. And Judas Iscariot asked, why wasn't that perfume sold and the money given to the poor? And the part that I recall that I thought was a part of this story with Mary and Martha was Jesus saying, leave her alone. It was intended, or this part specifically, you will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. So Jesus was replying back to Judas and saying, while this was intended for a day of burial, she's using it for the right purpose because I'm here now and I am the most important thing and you won't always have me. And so I was wondering if you knew if this was supposedly at the same time, possibly even the same visit, or if these were separate occurrences that might have happened. And I know they're not both reported in the Gospels. They're reported in separate Gospels at separate times.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I don't know. I'm flipping real quick. I would guess it's possible that's the same visit. That's something to look into. I think that's really, really interesting. And there you see it's same visit or not, there you see in Judas other motivation. So that's Mary again, like that's Mary displaying this heart for worship and adoration. And so that's a kind of consistent picture of Mary. Judas sounds noble in what he's saying, but if you know some of the backstory, it says there in John, like Judas was about to betray Jesus. What you also learn about Judas is that he's the one who controlled the money, and so it's very possible for Judas there. He's not really saying that should be sold and the money given to the poor. He's very likely saying that money should be sold and given to our treasury, of which
And I
he
can
is in charge.
skim off the top. Yeah.
Yep. So there's some, that's where you see somebody being distracted by something that is not good. Whereas Mary's doing the right thing.
Yeah. And once again,
Judas,
if you don't know the context in that story, you may be on Judas's side. Like, it seems like that's a much better use of money to go ahead and sell expensive perfume and give it to the poor rather than to pour it on Jesus' feet, which is like a one-time. And from my perspective, if someone poured a bottle of perfume on my foot, I'd be more frustrated than anything else. I don't care how smelly it was back then, but
you're like, man,
yeah, come on, I gotta live with this.
It's so irritating.
What is this?
How many showers do I have to take to get that to wash off? No,
Yeah.
I think it's just pointing to it's pointing to the extravagant nature of worship. That worship is supposed to be this thing, this means by which we pour our whole selves out to God. I mean, that's the picture and the image that's being displayed there, and it is extravagant and it is costly. Worship should be extravagant. It should be costly. It should cost us something. It's worth it, though. I mean, it's like we're being called to pour out our whole selves, our whole lives, give everything that we have and everything that we are to God. And that's kind of the picture, the picture that's being put on display there. And I love that it's Mary because, again, it's just a consistent picture of Mary seems to have her priorities in order in both stories.
Yeah, it also says here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Mary served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. And so once again, it's a consistent picture of Martha doing all of the work and someone else hanging out. But the reason I brought this up was I had recalled that line in verse 8, you will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. Which, whether or not this is the same occurrence, I think the spirit behind that sentence still stands for this story of Martha and Mary, which is not only is Mary having the correct priority in this instance in spending time with Jesus, but there is an urgency there as well. So there's both priority and urgency. So if you go back to that quadrants that we talked about last week, like in Jesus's mind, Jesus is assigning spending time and listening to Jesus as both urgent and important. Not just important and non-urgent, which I think Martha would probably disagree with at first glance because she's like, we got to get the food on the table.
Yeah. No, but she's the. I mean, in the Luke story, it says the preparations that had to be done.
Mm-hmm.
She's the one who had made that decision that absolutely had to be done.
Yeah.
Jesus probably would have been content with a really simple,
some bread and some fish. He's good with that.
He's good with fish and bread. He knows
He's
what
good
to do
with bread and wine. You said in reference to that, you said, but wait, according to whom? Who said all those things had to be done? Did Jesus say all those things had to be done? Did the guests say all those things had to be done? No. Martha is the one who said all those things needed to be done. For me, that's just a hard distinction to draw, especially in our current context of, like, when we evaluate our own lives, we've already mentioned how we always feel busy, and a lot of times all the things we're doing are good, which is what Martha's doing here. All those things are good, important and necessary, but sometimes some of the things we are doing aren't necessary, and they are just our own expectations or expectations placed upon us that are getting in the way of things that are actually more important.
Yeah.
I think that's a hard distinction and a kind of a hard truth that we all need to take a look at our lives and be able to honestly say, like, is this something I need to do, whether for Jesus or my family, or is this something that is placed upon me that I can let go of?
Yeah.
So we kept going within that passage, and we kind of honed in on what Jesus' response to Martha is. And the first thing you said was that Jesus responds, Martha, Martha. He calls her name, and you can hear his care and his compassion in his response. I don't know if it's like Brady Bunch taking over.
Martha.
Yeah, I always read it as that, and so I was relieved, and it was helpful to hear that you're saying in his name you can hear his compassion and care. I was always like, Martha, Martha, like silly girl, kind of dismissive. And so he goes on, he says, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Um, the only one thing is needed is what's super refreshing, but also foreign to me. Once again, with the number of distractions we have, like it's really difficult to focus on one thing. And for instance, I'm in the adoption process right now, and we're active, so we're getting cases, and we get a little bit of information on a PDF about a mother when we're presented with a case, and the one thing we need to know is if we feel confident in that child becoming our child in the future. And yet my brain goes through 1,000 things about everything we hear about a birth mother and what that might mean for the implications of raising a child. And so those are the kind of things where it's like, I think it's actually more and more difficult for us to focus on the one thing is needed. And the reality that can happen at any moment, that in every moment there is possibly only one thing that's needed.
Yeah. And I think it's super important. This is not, I talked about this. This is not really Jesus saying it's one thing or the other. I think it is a matter of, I mean, the reality is for you and Tyler, like those things do need to be done, and you do need to think about those things, and details do need to be managed. And like in this story, they did need to eat, and somebody did need to cook a meal, and so all those things needed to happen. It's not about whether or not they needed to happen. It's about the priority given to them. And so I think when Jesus says one thing is needed, he's not saying one thing is needed, and that's to sit here with me, and we don't need to eat anything. But I think he's saying in the moment, there is one thing that should take priority over the other things. And they will help you then figure out how to do the other things and how to approach the other things. Read somebody talking about like, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, so is that what you're really referring to when you said Jesus isn't saying that the contemplative life is better than the active life, but he is saying that you can't put the cart before the horse?
Yeah, absolutely. I essentially said this later on, but until it is important and necessary in life to take a stand for things and to do things. But it's like, it's like trying to build something without looking at the directions. So which some people are skilled at, I am not. Most people can't just take some complex thing and put it together without first learning how to do it and what order it should go in. And I think that's what this is really about. It's like, yeah, there are things that need to be done, but if you just start going, if you just start speaking out about everything that sounds like you should speak out about it without taking time to really listen for the voice of Jesus, you may end up speaking out about the wrong thing, or you may end up taking a stand for the wrong thing because you haven't paid attention first to see what's truly important to God in that moment.
Yeah.
Which is me. Yeah. I'm sort of jumping ahead in the message with that, but yeah, it's ultimately like Jesus is not saying, like, this passage has been used in the past to say, therefore everybody should, real Christians live in monasteries and become monks and that kind of thing, because what Jesus really desires is people to simply sit at his feet. The end. And that's not what is being said in this story.
Do you feel like it also ties in with the long held debate of the faith versus works kind of conversation?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not faith or works. It's faith and works, but faith comes first.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly, I almost referenced that passage in this in this sermon. I thought about that, but that's exactly what's going on.
Yeah, you said later on, and when the one thing gets the focus it deserves, it's not the other things that don't get done. So it's not the activism or the actions that don't get done. It's just that they get done in the right order. I know as a staff, we've talked about that a good bit. You've had us read the book Essentialism, and that's something I continue to struggle with in just that, for some reason, and I don't know if this is universal or if it's just me, as much as I hate math, that is one of the places I apply math to the most, in a sense of, for instance, like if I exercise, psychology has proven that I will get more things done because I will have better focus and my energy levels will be higher. And I'm like, no, but you take like 30 minutes to an hour to exercise, and I don't have that time to do the work. And so it's one of those things where it's like you're just like computational brain can take over and not realize that things are weighted differently, and not all time is equal in how you spend it. And I think it's a hard lesson to learn that I continue to learn into adulthood of how am I ensuring that I'm making the most of all of my time, and that the priorities get weighted heaviest and they get done first.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, there's a difference between, I think those of us who are like really try to live lives with intention, we do that because we want our work to matter. We want our work to be actually working toward something. And the danger is when we don't stop. If you're a follower of Jesus and you want your life to matter and you want your work to matter, if you don't actually stop and listen for the voice of Jesus, you can end up spending a whole lot of time working on things that actually don't matter or actually won't last. And you can end up thinking that God's dependent on your work, which is another problem altogether. Like, I think in some ways, Martha was working to try to get favor or attention from Jesus. And in that moment, that's not actually what he wanted. And I think we can get caught in that cycle. Like, I'm working for Jesus. I know people in the church can, but people in general, like many people are doing a thing in life, have chosen a career or vocation because they want to make a difference with that thing. But just because you want to make a difference and just because you work all the time, it doesn't mean that you're making a difference, and it doesn't mean that you're pulling in the right direction with what you do. So, hence the importance of actually stopping and listening to make sure you're, there's a reason. I'm just throwing out a bunch of analogies that are coming into my brain rapid fire. There's a reason.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Yeah. There's a reason that football teams huddle before the play. Like the Packers could go out and every receiver could run a route that worked one time, and they think it's a really good route. But Aaron Rodgers doesn't know. Well, actually, that's a bad example. Aaron Rodgers can make any play work. I'm positive of that. Go Packers.
He could also run a no huddle offense, but yeah.
Yeah, so this is breaking down all over the place, but you know what I mean. Like, there is a reason.
We can take a bad team and talk about it if you want.
Yeah, let's talk about. I won't. I won't talk trash about the hometown team. Anyway.
Yeah, but you could have gotten away with the Bears.
Or did you see that? Did you see that game a couple weeks ago? I think the Packers and the Titans played each other.
Yeah,
I missed some of that. What was the final score? I'm sure it was very, very close.
It was one of those golf scores where we win because we had less points. I think it was like 42-14, something like that. They switched it up. It was one of those.
It was many less points. Anyway, but you get the idea. Like,
no, yeah, I do. And something you mentioned, you said maybe Martha was just trying to impress Jesus in that way, by getting all this stuff done, by the approval through providing the perfect meal and being the perfect hostess. And that made me think of spiritual gifts or not spiritual gifts. I think that the 5 love languages as well. Just in terms of like Martha seemed to be acting out of, I love people through acts of service. So Martha was acting out of acts of service and trying to love Jesus through that way. And Jesus was like, I'm a bigger fan of quality time. And Mary was able to recognize that and sit with Jesus and listen to Jesus, and that's how he felt best loved.
Yeah, I think there's certainly some of that. I would say probably, again, I think it's about priority and order.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus is clearly also about acts of service.
Yeah, for sure.
But you have to know what the acts of service are. You have to know what the issue is. You have to know what the voice is that God wants to speak with about a particular circumstance or issue. And if you don't take the time listening for that voice and learning from Jesus, then you can't trust. You can't be trusted on your own to go in the right direction all the time.
Yeah. So you said the question isn't which one of these is right and which one is wrong, and that's what we're talking about. Jesus isn't saying worship is right and activism is wrong. The question is which one of these is the better starting point? Which one of these should come first? And then you went on to talk about how Mary takes a sit and Martha takes a stand, and how that impacts the way that they therefore are in community with Jesus and worshiping Jesus. And you said, if we don't sit before we stand, if we don't worship before we work, we don't know where to go or what to do or what to say when we get there. So another analogy that kind of works with is this idea of like, you can do a spontaneous road trip, or you can do a road trip where you've done some prep. And you can do a road trip where you've reserved a hotel and you know that you're going to take 8 hours to get there, and you know that you would probably like to eat lunch around 12 to 1 o'clock, and you've maybe highlighted some exits that all three of your kids would be on board with eating at this Chick-fil-A rather than an exit with just a Subway, and all that kind of stuff of like prepping your journey so that you know and you're confident of what to do when you get there, versus setting out saying, I need to go to Orlando now, and not knowing what's going to come as a result of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right on. That's a good analogy. There are many.
There are many for sure. It's all, once again, it's all coming down to that priority and what comes first. But the other thing you mentioned in reference to that is, not only are we talking about sitting and standing in the process, that sitting first so that we can then take a stand, being educated and aware of what God is leading us to do and where his voice is in the conversation. But you also said this feels more important than ever to point out all feet are not created equal. If you want to stand for the right things in your life, you've got to sit at the right feet. If you want to stand with your own feet for the right things in life, you've got to first sit at the feet of Jesus. This reminds me of the conversation we had last week, where we talked about you can only follow one thing at a time, or one person at a time, and so you can only sit at one person or one thing's feet at a time. You can only learn from primarily one source at a time.
Yeah. Ultimately, there is one. There might be many contributing voices along the way, but ultimately, I think there's only room for one dominant voice. And as people trying to put first things first, we have to intentionally make that voice the voice of Jesus. It doesn't happen excuse me. It doesn't happen accidentally or by osmosis or any of those things. I think it's got to be done with a great deal of intention.
Yeah, and especially because like you said, there's a ton of voices, and Jesus often, if not rarely, is the loudest voice. Getting into a situation where Jesus is the loudest voice is very intentional, and it's setting aside the time, and it's finding a quiet place, and it's setting aside distractions. It's being very present. And so it's one of the hardest things to do, is to make sure that you are hearing Jesus's voice above everything else. So from there, you talked about what's going currently on in our country, and you talked about how people are kind of coming into your inbox saying, in response to your response, saying, I love this, or I don't care for this with an assumption of where you are at on a political spectrum. And you just talked about that your greatest aim in life is to one that you know you miss more often than you'd like because you are a simple human being, is to take cues from what Jesus says. And so you ended all of that statement with something that stood out to me, which is you said, "Did I do everything that I could to invite other people to follow Jesus and give their lives to him and find their lives in him? Those are the things that matter, not how well I made sure to line up with some fabricated continuum of belief that we call the left and the right." For me, the fabricated continuum is what really stood out, and it's a helpful distinguishing factor because right now, I at least feel like truth has become more and more relative and conditional. And as a Christian, I am called to know and believe in one truth, and that is Jesus. And so,
Yep.
If that is the case, if you are someone who's seeking to follow Jesus and you're trying to put your trust in Jesus as the only concrete truth, then you have to be willing to say that this is a fabricated continuum, that is a fabricated, that someone else along the way made this up.
Yep.
And so that was helpful for me to be able to just name it and call it what it is. And I appreciate you doing that, of saying, God did not ordain this two-party system.
Nope.
And it's not.
Yeah,
on
Republicans and Democrats are human. They are human-made realities, and that will not. I've said this. I feel like I've been saying the same thing for several months, but it's because I feel like it needs to be said just as a constant reminder that, like, these are made up things by human beings that will not stand the test of time. They have not always been. They are but a blip on the radar screen of eternity. So do they play important roles in our society as we know it? Sure thing. Absolutely they do. But they are blips on the radar screen of eternity, if that, and there will be a day when they are no longer standing, when there are no longer Republicans or Democrats. There will be a day, believe it or not. It's hard for us who live here to recognize this, but there will be a day when the United States of America is no longer a country, because that's how things work in the world. That's how things work in world history. But there will never be a day when Jesus is not still standing. There will never, ever be, I'll say that again, there will never be a day when Jesus will not still be standing.
Yeah. And if the timeline is not helpful for you, the error rate should be. If you look at the number of mistakes people from both parties have made throughout time versus your ability to put your trust in someone who literally rose from the dead, maybe
I've never
helpful.
seen a Republican or a Democrat do that. Yeah, so therefore for me, if I have to choose to give my life and my allegiance to something or someone, and make no mistake, everyone is giving their life and their allegiance to something or someone. So there is nobody who is not doing that. There's a lot of people are giving that to parties or politicians. A lot of people are giving that to certain ways of thought. A lot of people are giving that to themselves, where they set themselves up as the ultimate authority on all things. And so it's like, whatever I think must be right. I'll just say I've been around myself too much to know that that is a bad idea for me, to give my allegiance to myself. It doesn't work out well when that happens. And so if I have to choose a place to give my allegiance, it only makes sense to give my allegiance to the one who, like you said, rose from the dead. I only know of one, and who will be standing, who has stood the test of time, who will be standing at the end of time. I mean, that's what it all comes down to for me, which means I am not going to, I'm not always going to fit in a system that's not built around that.
Yeah, so this ties in with the questions that you really asked and you left us with. And these are some of the more practical things we can walk away with, and I have some follow-up questions with them. So you said, here's my question for you. Are you taking time to sit at the feet of Jesus, or are you too busy taking a stand for something else? So we talked all about the sitting and standing and the priority of that. Sit in front of Jesus, spend time, understand his will, what he is calling for, then take action. Um, and so, as you've seen that play out, as you sit at the feet of Jesus and you feel led to stand, how do you know? How do you do that, and how do you know it's Jesus led rather than possibly one of these other voices?
Yeah, I can answer part of that. I can make an attempt at answering all of that. I mean, my method is it's what I said in the challenge for the week today, which is give your first 15 minutes to God. Allow God to be the first voice in your head, in your life. And so, so for example, last week, when things were happening in the Capitol and all of that was happening, a lot of my first response was prayer and was, prayer and searching scripture. It's like, it's boring. I feel like my answer to this, Chris, is really boring, but I just believe in like a good old fashioned quiet time, of reading the Bible and praying and trying to sort things out there. And so often the things that not always, I wish I could say always, sometimes I do just fire off a response, that probably comes from me more than anything else. But very often things that I say and things that I write, come directly into my mind and heart during that old fashioned quiet time, where I am reading the Bible and I'm praying and I'm trying to do more listening than talking. So, I mean, that's for me, that's the method. It is boring and plain. It is not sexy. It's not actually, I actually read something this week though about, this was in a commentary about this passage of Mary and Martha. And I thought this was really helpful and spoke a lot to 21st century spirituality. I want to read it if that's okay.
Yep.
It says this text is very specific. It does not speak about meditation, about periods of stillness, about yoga classes, about walks in the woods, or about me time. Valuable as these doubtless are, they are not the one needed thing. The text doesn't speak about spiritual exercises in general, nor can Mary's position be likened to spiritual exercises that are endorsed by contemporary culture. It speaks about sitting at the feet of Jesus, that is, acting as his disciple. This is the one thing that must not be taken away from any person. Martha may not do that to her sister. I thought, I mean, that was challenging. That was a challenging word because, even in Christian spirituality in the 21st century, there's a lot of talk about things like just go for a walk in the woods, just meditate, just be still, spend that me time. But I think the point of the text here is, to sit at the feet of Jesus. Like, so if you think about Jesus himself, Jesus had the Old Testament memorized. Rabbis had the entire scripture committed to memory, which meant that for Jesus, spiritual practice wasn't just walking around in the wilderness and praying, and then hoping that God would download some information into his head. And that did happen. God absolutely can speak through those things. But what's unspoken about what was the reality for Jesus is that he had the entire Old Testament, as we know it, memorized. And so often what Jesus said was a direct quotation of something that was in Scripture. So, so if I'm trying to follow Jesus and sit at the feet of Jesus, I think that means I need to spend an enormous amount of time in Scripture and learning, like hearing the voice of God specifically through that, and not just going through some de-stress exercises.
Yeah.
And again, I think this commentary wasn't saying those things aren't good and those things aren't important, but it was saying like make no mistake, they're not the same. They're probably not of equal value in terms of really growing into the likeness of Jesus, who, if he had the whole Hebrew scriptures memorized, that you don't just automatically do that, right? That takes
especially those
enormous
genealogies.
amount of intentional effort. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, read the book of Numbers. Imagine memorizing that.
Yeah, Leviticus is rough too, but yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, I definitely agree. I think that's a hard, challenging word because it is often so tempting to say, what are the applicable things that I can do? What are the things we often just think of? What are the things that I can add to my schedule to fix it? And I think the only thing I would add is that more often than not, I'm uncomfortable with some of the answers I hear from God in terms of how they affect my comfort level, and if my desires and God's desires don't often line up completely.
Yeah.
So if I am doing what you're
Yes.
talking about, and I'm especially in a time where there's a ton going on in our country and we're trying to think of ways that we can respond, I might come to God and have a different answer than what lines up perfectly with my life and my priorities and what makes me feel safe and what makes me feel comfortable. And there might be an answer from God that I wouldn't otherwise feel comfortable talking about or posting because it might not be for my best benefit, but it is what I believe the truth of God to be. So that's the only thing I would also add in terms of when you're spending that time and you come out with what you feel like is a good response. That could possibly even be a litmus test of like, well, would I have said this before I spent that time?
Yeah. If you're not challenged, if you're not challenged by the voice of God, then you're not actually listening to God.
Yeah.
And if you agree with everything you think God says, then you're not listening to God. You're listening to yourself. You've created God in your own image. Because there's not a person on the planet who, if they were really listening to the voice of God, who would not be challenged to think differently and act differently and speak differently in some way, shape, or form.
I think that's a good word, and that's a key distinction. Because I also know that I could very easily sit and read scripture, and the things that I found were only the things I cherry picked because they agree with what I might already agree with. And so I think the intentionality entering into that quiet time that you're talking about, of just being like, God, speak, and I'm going to listen, rather than this is what I want to say, let's confirm that, is important.
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. So yeah, the commitment that you're asking us as a church and us as a community to do this week is to give God the first 15 minutes of your day. And we've talked about this a little bit before, and if you don't have anything else to add, that's completely fine. But what have you found the most helpful in establishing that commitment in your life? Or even when you kind of fall off the wagon, what's the most helpful thing to bring you back in?
Yeah. The thing I found the most helpful is to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, is to just actually do it. To set my alarm earlier, get my booty out of bed earlier, not to think about it, not to talk about it, not to intend to do it. So I mean, again, it's like a simple answer, but this, I would say this is an area where it's not the thought that counts.
Mm-hmm.
It is not the thought that counts.
So with that being said, you have found that until you do it, it's hard to see the value in it, essentially.
Yes. Yeah.
And that the more you do it, so say you're able to do it a week consistently, that's when you're able to take a look back and say, okay, this is why it matters, and it becomes more and easier to make it feel like a valuable part of your day.
My faith journey, looking back over 30 plus years now, is like the stock market, and I don't have this like always up and to the right growth in my faith in life. It is the ups and downs of the stock market. But as I look back, my downtimes are the times when I am, almost without exception, I think, my downtimes are the times when I have become inconsistent with my own personal spiritual practices.
Yeah.
And my uptimes, when I begin to invest again with intention and putting that time in, I almost always after a certain period, it's not immediate always, it's not automatic, but there is something about that intentional investment that I can, if I'm just tracking the stock market growth of my faith, I always see growth from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes I don't see it in the moment, but I always can see it. I can see it retroactively for sure.
So I think the 3 takeaways with that is, if you're someone listening who's trying to give God the first 15 minutes of your day, number 1, just do it. Nike motto, make that happen. Number 2, we have the Village Daily Bible available for people. If you haven't already signed up, you'll get an email every morning at 5 a.m. So it can be the first thing you look at, likely, unless you're a super early riser. So you can use that to be on the same page and read alongside other people, hear some other people's insight as well. And then the third thing that I've heard you say before, and we've talked about before, is the psychology behind finding a specific place where that happens.
Yeah.
So that you separate that from your playtime or your work time, that it's a specific place and a specific time that you can say, okay, this is where I spend my time face down in front of Jesus. And that can just become a kind of a holy, sacred place for you. So,
yeah, I think that's important. I've just found that rhythm helps. And again, there's a book that came out a couple years ago called Present Over Perfect, which I really like. I haven't read the book, but I really like the title.
I do too.
So the ideal is that you've got this place and time, but it's more important to be present over perfect. So even for me this year, I'm 17 days in. I'm on a 17-day streak of starting my day with the Bible, and I'm probably like 80% in my place, but I have had some days where I'm like, okay, I can't get there right now, or I'm not going to go there right now, but I'm still going to read from where I am, and maybe I've got some journal practicing that I'm doing, and I've had several days where I've been like, okay, I'm not going to do that today, but I am still absolutely going to hit this core commitment of reading.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't want to I very much appreciate present over perfect too, as a perfectionist minded person, because, like, for instance, with working out, something that I've always struggled with is I've never been a working out. I know you can't tell, but I've never been a workout.
I wouldn't have guessed. No, man.
And so if I dive in with huge expectations, and day 1, maybe I can complete a workout, and day 2 or 3, I'm too sore and I can't do the whole thing. I just want to give up because I can't do the whole thing. So I guess the additional advice is, yes, a place can help. Yes, journaling can help, but don't set yourself up for, if those things are helpful for you, set yourself up to be able to do those things, but don't set yourself up to fail and then give up on the whole practice of spending your 15 minutes with Jesus because you don't feel like you can continue to do journaling, get out of bed and go to your place, open up your Bible and have a highlighter, like those kind of things. The present is more important than the perfect there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I know you shared one quote already. Do you have anything else you'd love to share from this week's message that you weren't able to?
One other thing, this would just be a practical recommendation. We've got our daily Bible reading plan. That is typically every day is a brief reading. It's a video. of somebody from our church giving their thoughts on that, which is a really great starting point for that. I would say for somebody who's looking to maybe take a step farther, one thing I would hugely recommend is it's called The Bible in 1 Year. And Nicky Gumbel he's a pastor at a church in London, Holy Trinity Brompton. It's an Anglican church, so he's a vicar. I think that's what that's called. Anyway, he's brilliant and accessible, and I finished that plan at the end of last year, and so it's a 1 year through the entire Bible reading plan. But every day he writes for people who struggle, especially with you mentioned Leviticus earlier. I think sometimes people start reading the Bible and they get through Genesis and Exodus and then stop in Leviticus.
Yep.
Because it's like, I don't even know what the heck this is talking about. What I love about that plan is that Nicky writes an introduction for every single day. It ties the readings together, kind of gives some context and explanation in just this really straightforward, very accessible way. So, if you're looking for a plan there, I couldn't recommend that one more highly. So I think you can go to like thebiblein1year.com or .org. We can maybe put that in the notes, but
yeah, awesome. I know I've done a Bible in a year, and it was the first time I'd read all the way through the Bible, and I'm not going to lie, it's a lot. But you're going to glean more than you think when you're reading it, possibly.
Yeah.
And the one I read was also a mix between, it would give you a few chapters of Old Testament, then you go to a few chapters of New Testament in the same day. So you're getting flavors from both sides. And if you're struggling with some of the longer and more particularly contextual pieces of the Old Testament, like Leviticus or Numbers, where they may just be talking about proportions of the temple, you also will be getting some stuff from the epistles of Paul that feel very relatable to what you're going through at a certain time. So that's super helpful. Awesome. I think the last thing I have is you ended our service with this one question, and I want to be open and honest about it, and hopefully it'll help people to evaluate it as well. But you said, what voice in your life are you listening to more often than the voice of God? And so I think that's a good question for our people. And I know for me, that voice is most often, I kind of reference it, is fear of leaving my comfort zone, of failing, of offending someone, of saying the wrong thing, taking chances, anything like that. And that is straight from the devil. And it's also just something that's a pretty common narrative in my own head. And so, I think being aware of that is helpful to know that God's not going to be speaking the same things. Like, God is not speaking to me out of fear when he also commands me not to fear. So that's where I'm at with that. And I hope that's helpful for other people to hear that they're not alone in that and answering that question.
Yeah, absolutely. We had some good conversation about that with our family, with my boys, and the reality is that is our natural tendency is to sway toward other voices, or like, what's the loudest voice right now? What's the what's the most intense voice that I'm hearing, or what's the thing that I don't know. There's lots of temptation to be drawn to other voices, and there are a lot of loud voices. And we're in a place in the world right now where if you have the internet, you have a global platform.
Yeah.
So anybody can say anything, anytime, as long as they have an internet connection. So there's literally potential for like 8 billion different voices to be louder than the voice of God. Yeah. And not to mention the fact that I think there's a real spiritual enemy as well who wants to have a voice louder than the voice of God in our lives. And so there's lots of pressure. There's lots of real struggle constantly trying to pull us away. So that's all the more reason to make a commitment and kind of do this with a lot of intention.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, if you wouldn't mind, would you pray us out?
Yeah, love to. Thanks, man.
Mm-hmm.
God, we love you and we need you. We desperately need your voice in our lives. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of temptation. There are a lot of things that we feel called to do, or a lot of voices that seem loud, that we feel like we should listen to. But God, I pray that you would soften and quiet the other voices. Help us to listen to your voice first and foremost, not so that we don't ever hear other voices, but so that we can kind of prioritize and filter and know how to navigate all of the things that we're faced with. God, we're all here. Everybody who's listening to this is somebody who wants to live a life with intention and purpose and to make an impact and to make a difference. And so, God, help us to refocus our time and energy and effort on you, on the voice of Jesus, on where it is that he leads us. So help us to see that clearly and give us the boldness and the courage to follow wherever it is that he leads. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Awesome. Well, y'all, we hope you enjoy the rest of your week and can join us on Sunday as we take part 3 of First Things First. That's Sunday at 9 a.m. at thevillagenashville.com/live or on YouTube. Don't forget to check out the show notes for the link to Daily Bible as well as the Bible in 1 year. And don't forget to strive to take the first 15 minutes of your day and spend it with Jesus. So have a good one. We can't wait to see you guys soon. Bye.